What's the most NSFW thing you've experienced in a professional situation? I was 14 and on my first summer job ever. A well-dressed middle-aged businessman comes in and we have completely normal chit-chat I can't remember anymore, except for the fact that he said he had seen me working in the window a few times. He then takes a thing out of his pocket and reaches out his hand. Without thinking, I stick out my hand and take it, which turns out to be a dirty tissue. In a very kind voice, he says, "I want you to know that I pleasured myself thinking about you," flashes a nice smile, and without any rush, leaves. Even said hi to my boss on his way out. Took me a while to understand it really happened and to start doing something about it, just enough time for him to leave. He knew it and did it on purpose. I spent the rest of the day mostly crying in the bathroom. It was a huge contrast from what I was used to on that job. I had the best time and people were wonderful, and completely having my guard down threw me off. Edit. I'm getting many of the same questions, so I'll answer them here. I never went to the police. Back then, I only told my closest friends. I think that's the reason why I felt so angry about this for quite a while. I wasn't necessarily traumatized, but I definitely had these pangs of anger when I thought about the situation in the shower or lying on the bed. I would have had everything I could possibly need to go to the police. We had cameras, I had the tissue, and I had the greatest boss whom I knew would have immediately believed me and acted right then and there. She was an amazing lady, and I know that if I had immediately opened my mouth and yelled to her what happened, she would have slammed the door and not let him leave. I didn't go to the police, firstly because I felt deeply ashamed of what had happened. Just saying the words he told me out loud was way too much. I didn't even tell my sisters until years later because I knew they would tell my parents, and I told them everything. The first person I told exactly what happened to, with details, was my then boyfriend 2 years after it happened, and he was the first person who even mentioned the police. The second reason I never told anyone, let alone the police, is that it wasn't anything completely revolutionary to me. Yes, it was deeply shocking to someone who had only kissed guys and was pretty much unaware that people around me even pleasured themselves, but I had been harassed and humiliated before that incident so many times. I always thought you just deal with it and move on. And I don't mean hormonal teenage boys, not saying that guys that age aren't capable of doing horrible and traumatic stuff too, but grown men. Grown men had offered me money to bang, taken pictures of me, called me names, stared at me. I've been touched against my will, complimented, and shown dong I didn't want to see. And I'm not talking about only being a teen. I remember men starting to notice me when I was as young as 8 or 9. It definitely got worse after I developed hips and a butt as a preteen, but it happened even before I had the shape of a woman. And even then, I was still stick thin and looked young, just like I still do now. Everyone I knew had been harassed. I promise you, every single living female has at least one story like this. After this incident, I have been harassed, like my second boss on my second job accidentally smacking my butt when I was 15 to give one example, or things that can't quite be counted as harassment, but like approaching so many times while working, I can't even start listing those incidents. Working on customer service as a female does that. I still get that treatment, but I know exactly how to deal with the creeps nowadays. It took me a long time to realize that I have the right to be other things than nice and polite to strangers, especially at work. And you can do it by not being vulgar or physically offensive, but making your message loud and clear. Fun tip that works surprisingly often after someone shoots you with a greasy, disgusting comment: just intensely staring at him with a deadpan face. Not saying one word or acknowledging his action, but just staring the crap out of him is ridiculously effective. Complete your job while not moving an inch. If he is the tiniest bit normal, he will get uncomfortable as hell and even start apologizing. People, don't be afraid to call security, tell your boss, or even go to the police. You are not going to work to be asked about your kitty. You go there to make money and deserve to be respected as a human being while doing it. Now looking back to it, easily the worst part is that he knew he could get away with it. He knew exactly what he was doing with that repulsive, gentle voice he was using. And it makes it so very disgusting. Obviously, he was sure that I would never go to the police either. I'm 100% sure that he has done it before and maybe even does this today. He saw how completely I froze and took his sweet time nonchalantly wandering out of the store, underlining his power and how he was humiliating me. He was so completely relaxed and certain of himself. When your brain registers that someone is smiling and expressing completely non-threatening body language while communicating with you, but his actions are the complete opposite of that, it takes you even longer to understand what's happening. He was a disgusting piece of crap, and unfortunately there are plenty of disgusting pieces of crap out there. So please, people, teach your girls that they have the right to act when someone harasses or attacks them. And it's not her fault. Pretty much in every culture in this world, girls are raised to be polite and not difficult, especially to strangers. If you are a parent of a daughter, has your daughter ever screamed from the top of her lungs? ask her. If she hasn't, take her somewhere where she can practice it. Women freezing when being harassed or even assaulted is incredibly common, and it's one of the structures keeping this system where the overwhelming majority of assaulters walk out unharmed and unpunished. Because we blame ourselves for not acting and hate ourselves later for it. It is incredibly common for people who have been assaulted or abused to think no one will believe them because there's no evidence of physical struggle, and even believe they deserved it because they let it happen. And as a side note, unfortunately, the marks of physical fights are still the #1 evidence, at least in my country. Getting charged, let alone sentenced without them for aggravated intimate assault is extremely low. And even just for flat-out intimate assault, it's hard. That's one of the reasons why, out of all of the assaults in the world or my country, only the tiniest handful ends up with an actual conviction. When the situation where you should scream or attempt physical violence on another human for the first time of your life is an extremely overwhelming and scary one, the possibility of just freezing and checking out is high because it is simply too much. Unfortunately, no matter how common it is, we still don't really talk about it. Teach girls to act or notice it while sentencing assaults. Okay, I'll stop rambling here. Quite heavy stuff, and my intention wasn't to write this much when I started, but it feels good to let it out. Let's make the world a better place, people. Maybe one day young children, girls, and women won't have to go through all this. That was a lot. That's a very long and heavy post to start out with, so if you stuck it through there, that's impressive, and I hope you learned something. And if you didn't, if you just skipped to the end and now you're hearing this, that's fine too. You don't have to want to hear about stuff like that, but it is good for it to be talked about at least. There's more I want to say, but I think on to the next story would be the best use of time.